I do that every year. It fascinates me. I love a Google image search. I've done that every year for probably the last 10 years. It's amazing to see the changes in who makes the front cover. But for the last 10 years, it has been very obvious to me that having short, dirty blonde hair isn't the way to get. Isn't the way forward. Never mind. The Queen's helping me out. Note to self, notwithstanding the geopolitical depression points, never let marketeers introduce you. Enlightening, inspiring, entertaining. They're additions to the brief I wasn't expecting. But actually, look, it's a delight to be here. I used to live in Edinburgh. It's lovely to have an excuse to come back. But, you know, there is a price to pay for all this delight of seeing some very familiar faces, some folks that I've known well, and it's lovely to see people from yesterdecade. But the price I pay is this quite tough brief. You know, let me just summarise the brief that Graham gave me. So this is the 10th year. You'll have a room of about 150 people, you know, esteemed colleagues with massive experience, so probably somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, I did the maths, not Graham, years of collective experience. And can you just come and talk about a big idea? And it'll be just after lunch. Thanks. So, slightly tough brief. And I'm not really sure what constitutes a big idea. But I thought, let's talk about things that I think are important. Now, I don't mean, like I'm 51, I don't mean the things I wish I'd known when I was 21. That's a laundry list that we can unpack and chat about another time. But like what's really important, I think is quite interesting. And stylistically, obviously it's the Ogilvy lecture, so I thought I'd take a bit of inspiration from the big man himself. He said, I'm going to check to get my words exactly right, he said that ideas come from groping experimentations governed by intuitive hunches, inspired by the unconscious. So if you're willing to accompany me for some groping experimentations, which is different from experimental groping, then let's go. Okay, so when I think about what I think is really important, like big important, not little important, two things that I would reflect on. One, the road to hell is paved with assumptions. What I mean by that is every single thing that I have ever fucked up started with me making an assumption. An assumption about, does someone like something or not like something? Does someone understand something or not understand something? Is someone capable or not of something? Does someone realise they're going to do that or not? Born out of empathy and compassion and trying to be a good person, or thinking I'm quite intuitive or perceptive, I've assumed something about someone or something, and that's the point that it all started to unravel. So, if nothing else, just take 2 minutes to check in. Now, that's not the beginning of a speech, but there you go. That is my first of two big thoughts. My second one is the one that we'll unpack a bit more, which is this. If you don't know who she is, I'm old enough to be your mum, and we can't be friends. It's Avril Lavigne, from the front cover of her debut album, Let's Go, which included the smash hit, global international single success, Why'd You Have to Go and Make Things So Complicated? That, I can't sing. I think everything's too fucking complicated. Now, at this point, it's really tempting, literally, it's really tempting to go, so let's keep it simple, and I then keep it simple by dropping the mic and walking out. That's not what you pay for my flight up here for, which I've got to keep talking a bit longer, right? Okay. So let's just think about being complicated. Because I think that, life is simple, but we overcomplicate it. Why do we do that? I think of myself as, a bear of relatively simple brain. I'm often heard to say, can we just rewind a minute? Like, what's the real point? What's the big thing? What's the thing at the middle? We can deal with the first thing first and the other things later. I love people who take apparently complicated things and boil them down. Let's not boil the ocean, let's just do one thing and do it well. I love the people who use their intellectual horsepower to make things simple, because that's the intellectual horsepower that's useful. Like, any nutter can make things sound complicated and add twiddly bits. It sounds clever maybe, but I think making things simple is the hard bit, and I think that that's what we should focus on doing. And so that's what I'm going to try to do, right? But Einstein said we should simplify everything as much as possible, but not too much, he said. And that's the trick, isn't it, right? If we oversimplify, then we miss the point. But let's spend some time talking about simplicity, right? I think that we are knowledge workers, thought workers. We're white-collar workers, aren't we? Our companies say things in their annual reports and accounts like, our people are our greatest assets. Now, I don't know about you, but the company that employs me doesn't employ me for what my body can physically do every day. It employs me, I believe, for what my brain can do. And therefore, if my value comes from what my brain can do, it better be a bit fancy. I better do a bit of mental gymnastics, a bit of fancy footwork in the brain stakes. And if I'm just doing things that are really simple, am I justifying my salary? That's probably going on somewhere in the back of my mind. And I think that happens to us all. I'm reading Lord of the Rings to my youngest kid at the moment. I think that kind of pressure to do something new, original, to differentiate, all those things that we may or may, to be distinctive, obviously, in a how brands grow kind of way. To do all that, that pressure makes us a bit tricksy. I'm reading Lord of the Rings to my kids. We become tricksy hobbitses, and we don't need to. 30-something years ago, I embarked on another mistake, road to hell, pay for the assumptions. I embarked on an engineering degree. That was a mistake. Predicated on the assumption, I'm really good at maths, I'm really good at physics, I'll be really good at engineering. I was wrong. I should have checked that out. Anyway, this dude, Professor Sir Michael Brady, who was the head of department at the time, he did this. He stood there, he didn't stand behind a lectern, he did this. And he did the welcome lecture to us 200 aspiring mathematicians and physicists who might one day be engineers, not me. And he talked, this was 1990, he talked about, that was in the days, it might sound familiar now, but that was in the days when high tech was important. Technology could solve everything, Absolutely, the technology was the answer to literally everything. It sounds familiar, I think we're still there. But certainly in 1990, high tech was the thing. And he spent an hour, and I remember this lecture so vividly, because I kid you not, in the space of 4 years, it was the only lecture where I understood everything that was said in the whole 60 minutes of the lecture. It went all downhill from here. At the end of this lecture, I was buzzing. I'm like, I get this. This is great. Because he was imploring us to use appropriate tech. Take what you're going to learn some fancy, clever things. You're going to learn some really hard maths. But don't use it willy-nilly. Do we need to spend 7 years creating a gravity-defying pen, or do we just use a fucking pencil? That was his point. Yes, appropriate technology, not high technology. And I think that, I've tried this thought out on lots of people. Before coming here, I've sort of nudged into it, whether it's with a taxi driver or with a mate or with a colleague, I've kind of nudged into a conversation about why are things so complicated. And do you think they're more complicated, or is it just me? And everyone I've spoken to has nodded along, gone, yeah, why is it all a bit complicated? I think we all agree that 651 868ths isn't that easy to imagine. But we all know what 3/4 looks like. Literally, that's called simplifying fractions. I think we all agree that that's a good thing. But we all still sit in meetings where everyone just adds, can I just build on that thing? Yeah, you can build on it. You're probably going to say 95% of what the other person's just said, but the 5% you add is just another little layer of a bit more. It's a shadow of a shadow of a shadow, and now we've got a thing, and before we had that, and now we've got this. Yeah, crack on, do it. Why do we still fucking do it? Why are we still multiplying up? We are. We're all doing it. I'm guessing from the laugh. So either you think I'm an idiot, or you recognise yourself. I'm going to shoot with the second one. So I've been thinking about why. I've been researching. I like a bit of brain science, not enough to get too complicated. I haven't got a PhD and I've never done a practical. But I quite like the idea of understanding why before trying to solve. So, a bit of diagnosis before strategy. So, I've looked at why. And the first thing is we all have, deep in our brains, the complexity bias. Where we have affirmation bias, we have confirmation bias, we have all sorts of biases. We're riddled with biases. And the evolutionary roots of this one is complicated, and I don't understand it very well, but we can try and unpack that later if we want. But the point is, we all have the complexity bias, which basically means if we're given two solutions to things, two ideas, two reasons, two explanations, two hypotheses, we will gravitate towards the more complicated one, because it can't be that simple, can it? The pencil, bit too fucking easy. Let's go for the gravitate to the fine pen. Yeah? We all do that. So instead of, I know I need to do all these things, but what we actually do is a bit more complicated. For example, I'm feeling a bit tired. What will I do? I'll go to the doctor and make them do a blood test, because I'm probably anemic. No, I'll just stop reading past my bedtime. Or actually, I'm a bit short of cash. I'm going to spend 2 hours going through the intricacies of my mobile phone contract to see if I can eke out a bit. No, how many cocktails have you bought recently? Right? Like, hello. There was a brilliant study done in 1989 by Farris and Revlin, and they did this thing, right? They got a bunch of students, and they said, individually, you're going to guess a number sequence, like a series of numbers. So you're going to guess the rules. So the numbers are 2, 6, 12. Made that up. And you've got to guess. Your task is to work out what the rule is for that sequence, right? And the only way you're allowed to do it, you can't just say what's the rule, because that would be daft. You've got to give me a number sequence, and I will tell you if it fits the rule or not. Do you see how that works? Yeah? And by trial and error, you've then got to come up with what you think the rule for this sequence is. The rule was the numbers get bigger. That's all it was. First 20 students, no one got it. They had square roots, they had pi, they had, intricate, all sorts of little functions of maths. I don't know if they got as far as partial differentiation and integration, but they were like well into the complexity. Over the course of the study, some people did get it, but the vast majority went off into stratospheric complexity, because it can't be that simple. It can't just be the numbers going up, can it? Which I thought was brilliant. So we have a complexity bias. Lovely. Couple that with the fact that I'm sure many of you have read or have heard the work of Barry Schwartz and the paradox of choice. Right? So the paradox of choice basically says in Western affluent societies, we have a desire for welfare and well-being, yes. And freedom is a big unlocker of welfare and well-being. I'm still with you. I totally agree with that. Having the freedom to choose, having the freedom to do my thing is a way of giving me better chance of good welfare and strong well-being. Yes. But the paradox of choice is, when you start to conflate freedom with choice, it doesn't follow that more and more and more and more and more choice is infinitely good for us. I don't know how you feel, but my local Sainsbury's, a brand I love, has 175 different salad dressings. It has 65 toothpastes. I don't need that shit in my life. Right? But because choice is good, it's power, it's freedom, it's well-being. It's not. Think about when I was a kid, if you wanted a pair of jeans, you went into C&A and you bought a pair of jeans in your size, and you walked out again. They didn't necessarily fit very well. They weren't very comfy until you'd washed them 3 times, and then you did the lying down on the floor because they'd shrunk, but then you got into them and then they were okay. And you were totally happy with that. Now, you go to buy a pair of jeans. Hello, I'd like a pair of jeans. Well, would you like straight cut, skinny cut, cropped, boyfriend cut, girlfriend cut, relaxed, baggy, wide leg, boot leg? Oh, I don't fucking know. Would you then like all the colours? Would you then like stone washed, acid washed, snow washed, indigo, blah, blah, blah. You can, on a rough calculation, just from my size, I could get 250 different jean types in the average shop that says it's a jean specialist-y bit rather than going to C&A. And what I want to say to that person is, I want the type that I used to buy in C&A. And then I want to leave your shop. What I have to do is spend about an hour trying on jeans. I hate trying clothes on. I have to spend about an hour trying things on, because this infinite, apparently, choice has now told me that there is the perfect pair somewhere in here for my footballer's legs. I've got to find that perfect pair. So not only am I feeling a bit bamboozled, and I've had to put in loads of cognitive effort that you forced me to put in, because I couldn't just buy the C&A pair and walk out, which I would have been perfectly happy with. Now I'm riddled with the already anticipated regret of, what if they're not perfect? Because the perfect pair were in there, but I might not find them. And if I don't get the perfect pair, A, I'll be massively disappointed, and B, I'll blame myself. Whereas when the C and A pair didn't fit too well, that wasn't my fault. And so infinite choice, or escalating choice, is really unhealthy for us. If you couple that with the fact that we have a bias to overcomplicate things, this is the beginning of a heady cocktail. I also think that there is this additional dynamic, particularly in an industry like ours. I mean, especially if you're agency side, the commodity that your agencies sell is your ideas. Holy moly, they better be good then. They better not be too obvious. They better not be too simple. I better add a few layers to it. And, it's true, isn't it? If you say something like, yeah, I think it should be red, people haven't listened to you for very long. I'll add a few other bits in. The thing about red, of course, is and maybe we should think about maroon, and because I'm talking for a bit longer and you're all listening. So people have engaged with me for a bit longer. So there's the instant gratification of people who listen to me for longer. How many times do I find myself saying, and people look at me a bit funny, that was spot on, I've got nothing to add. Now, against the backdrop of I'm paid for my ideas, does that make me feel like I've just valued myself, justified my salary? I think it does. But if you think you're paid for your ideas, it's not easy to square that up. I think we're paid for our results. And results come from diagnosis, strategy, tactics, action. It's all of them. It's not just the thinking part, right? So to me, reframing it to, I've got literally nothing to add, I couldn't have put that better. Brackets, I probably think I could have put it a bit better because I'm quite good with words, but I would have just put it different. So why would I waste everyone's time with just a little extra layer? Let's try to imagine putting those three things together. Of course, we complicate things. And then let's not forget jargon, the weapon of choice for the complicator. Right? Jargon, please. I don't know how you feel about jargon. I fucking hate it. So I don't just mean, I mean two things. I mean the words that people use when they're at work, when they've left their personalities at home. Like, utilise. Do you ever say to your mate, oh yeah, let's utilise the bus? Or revert. Do you ever revert after your mum's called? I don't. So there's that lot, and then there's the even word. I mean, that just makes you a wanker. But then there's the other lot that I think they're more weapony, the pointier weapons of jargon, which is the stuff that is our industry, right? The headless CMS. Oh yes, Martech is the favourite haunt at the moment, isn't it, for the jargon-wielding complicators. But that stuff, jargon's got a place, acronyms and jargon have a place, and the place is where we are all absolutely certain that we all understand it. Where we're all absolutely certain we've got a certain base level of knowledge that we all know what that thing stands for and that thing means. Then it can be great, right? It can be a real time saver, because we haven't got to say all the long words all the time. But the minute you're in a cross-functional meeting or a meeting with more senior and more junior people, sometimes the more junior people will know what you're talking about and the seniors don't, or the other way around. It's not a hierarchical thing. The minute you are not certain that everyone absolutely understands all the jargon, you started to create an in-group and an out-group. You were talking about diversity this morning. You started to create walls between people that go, oh, I better not ask what that is. I'll just get the gist, or I'll ask later. You won't. You'll just start to pull out from the conversation because you don't understand it. It is a shocker. Ban jargon from your lives, please. So, that's all going on. Things are still too complicated. What's the antidote? What's the solution? I haven't got an answer, but I've got some ideas. The psychologists would tell you that Occam's razor is the answer. That's great. I love that. I don't know who Occam was, and I don't know how beardy he or she was, but, and I've only read a bit about it, because the minute something's called Occam's razor, I start to get a bit less interested. I'm sure it's brilliant. I think it basically means pick a really simple hypothesis and work from there. So that's fine. But Occam's razor, Google it at your leisure. I've got something slightly different. anyone, there's a few people in the room who've worked with me, you probably feel obliquely acquainted with my mum. Here she is. That wasn't Halloween. That was an ordinary Tuesday. Grandmummy, you get the joke. Anyway, what I often, like at least once a day, I'm heard to say, "Can you explain that as if you're explaining it to my mum?" Now they don't know who my mum is. Hardly anyone who's worked with me who's heard the mum thing has seen a picture of mum. No one's ever met her. Here she is. She's an eater. She's 82. She parties like she's 22. She speaks 4 languages. She plays bridge. She's never worked in an office. She was a teacher and then a housewife. And either real or imagined conversations with my mum are my Occam's razor. Because she asks the most frustrating, infuriating, obvious, to the point questions. She'll go, "Why would they do that then?" And I go, "It's a really good point." And then I find myself wanting to say, "Well, it's a bit complicated." It's never complicated. If anyone ever starts an answer to a question with, "It's a bit complicated," say, "Well, no, it's not. Make it simple. Explain it to my mum. Or explain it to my kids." It doesn't matter who. You can explain it to Sarah's mum if you want. I mean, you can borrow her. She's very reasonable. Priced. So mum isn't interested in theories, or she's just like kitchen sink wisdom, right? Just straightforward stuff. And I find that when I say to someone else, I hadn't really realised the power of this question. When I say to someone, "Can you explain that like you're explaining it to my mum?" It forces you to get your head out your arse. So I do it to myself a lot, and I do it to someone I'm at work with most days. Because it stops me writing those presentations or those PowerPoints or those documents that look elegant on paper and just won't fucking work in the real world. And it's the really polite way of saying to someone else, "Can you stop talking gibberish and just get to the point?" Right? It's such and it puts it on you, it makes it a you thing. Can you just explain it? And trust me, everyone in the room will go, "Oh, thank God someone asked that," right? That's not the only tool I've got. I've got one other trick, which is what me and my team call the rumble word. And what that means is we have a safe word, which I'm not sharing because it's a secret. It's a very precious thing with the team. But when a conversation is rumbling on, and it's come back, I have an aspiration that we just my leadership team, that as a team, we only ever talk about things, we touch things once, right? You discuss it, you decide, you debate, you get on with it. And if something's rumbling on, or if it's in danger of coming back more than once, then one or other of us will say the rumble word. It's a random word, right? Potato. It's potato, right? Pretend it's potato. Someone will go, "I've got a potato this," which is a polite way of saying, "Really? I've got a potato this." And that snaps us all back into that mode of, we need to just debate, decide, do. And which means as soon as someone potatoes, it's nearly always not me. It's great. It's really empowering for the team. As soon as someone says, "I've got a potato this," I'll go, "Good point. Right. So have we got a decision? Have we just been blithering? Have we got a decision? Yes, no. If we have, great, it's dead. If we haven't, right, either it has to come back, but what's going to change between now and when it comes back? Because if nothing's going to change, it's not welcome. And if something's going to change, where's the action? Great. And then we move on. And I would say, on average, when we're together as a team, someone potatoes something every 45 minutes. Try it. You'll see how much you're blithering. It's quite interesting. Anyway, so I think that these kind of, come on, explain it to my mum. Let's just cut to what's the nub of the issue. I think you can apply that to literally anything. I don't mean everything should be boiled down to its absolute simplest. Remember what Einstein said, as simple as possible and no more. But I think you can apply it to absolutely anything. I thought it might be sensible, might be interesting to just take that and apply it to one of my favourite topics that gets oversimplified, overcomplicated. There's a thing. Maybe overcomplicated is an overcomplication. You can say complicated, don't you? Anyway, I think that one of my favourite topics that gets mashed about with and added to and trixied around is leadership. So let's just talk about that for a bit, right? How many books have been written about leadership? I found this the other day. There's a book about what you should have on your bookshelf about leadership. At this point, I lost the will to live. I've also hurt myself laughing. But, I mean, brilliant, right? So, if I ever write a book about leadership, brackets, I won't, it would only have one page. And that's why I won't write a book. maybe a small post-it note to myself. It would just say this. I think the job of leadership is this. There's all sorts of other fancy, tricksy filigree around the edges, of course, but our job as leaders is to set the direction, communicate it clearly, compellingly, and consistently, and then inspire and support people to deliver beyond what they thought was possible. I think that's it. There's one other little bit. Put your cameras away for a minute. No, it's all right. There's one other little bit, right? Which I also think we have to be ready to make the tough decisions when necessary. That's our job, right? You learn that from the military. But generally, our job, set the direction. How you do that is up to you. Your style is different from my style, is different from the person down the road style. You know, I do it very collaboratively. It doesn't have to be. Communicate it clearly, compellingly, consistently. One of the most important features of a leader is a high boredom threshold. Because you have to say the same thing again and again and again with enthusiasm. You know, with all due respect, there is a bit of a cliche, maybe it's true, about we have an advertising idea or communications idea, we gestate on it, we craft it, we love it, then it's born and we look after it, and then we're bored and we're thinking about the next one. Right? You can't do that in leadership. I'm sure you can't do it in branding either. But you know, in leadership, assume that every time you say something, people will retain about 5% of what you said. Which means you've got to say it 20 times before it's stuck. But you can't show that you're bored. So consistent, compelling communication. I start pretty much every deck I ever do at work with the same strategy on a page chart. If I change that chart, I started again. I go back to zero, right? The counters counts up. How many times have I said it? 5, 6, 7, 8. I changed the chart. Shit, I'm back to the beginning. I need people to understand the strategy. And I might be living it every day, but they're sure as hell not. So, but on this side, the one word that I think needs attention is the one word that I thought seriously long and hard about putting in it, because it's the word to me that stands out as a bit uck. Because I think when someone, me at this point, says inspire, I think other people hear, inspire! And I don't mean that. Because like we get, as leaders, we get those moments to inspire about once or twice a year, don't we, right? We get that opportunity, my favourite one of all time, every year, the Christmas conference at Sainsbury's, 7,000 colleagues in the NEC, you know, I was a pig in shit, you know, making people weep with the joy and pride of the organisation that they serve and the communities that they serve in. You know, you can imagine, right? That's inspire. And you get 1 or 2 opportunities a year to do that, those big set pieces. When I say inspire, I mean inspire with a little I. It's a daily practice. And it means making people happy, making them know that they've been heard, seen, known, listened to, respected, involved, engaged. When people say that I have inspired them, I never know why. And I've always found it a bit ucky and a bit embarrassing. And eventually I got over myself and I just asked. And I was like, you said that thing. I don't want this to be a sort of, praise me, come on. I don't want it to be that, but I just need to understand, what did I do that made a difference? And the sorts of thing I hear are, right, I'm going to tell you a story of Tamsin, who used to work at Sainsbury's. She still does, works at Sainsbury's. Bloody superstar, brilliant human being. Not in my direct team, but in my overall team. Goes on mat leave, a year, comes back, it's a Monday. She's a superstar. She's an absolute star. She's just going to rock straight back in, isn't she? Mondays in retail, don't know if many of you have worked in retail, Mondays in retail are quite busy. So you get in about 6:30, 7 o'clock and you go through your numbers. By 8, 8:30, you're in your little team group. I'm with my team going, what happened last week in the numbers, operationally and commercially, what do we need to fix? By 10 o'clock, I'm in with the 15 people who run the business, operationally day to day, going, right, what needs to be done across the piece so that by midday we're out and we are briefing an organisation of 200,000 people on what needs to be fixed. So the fixes are in place by 4:30 that day, and at 5 o'clock I go into the board and update them, right? That's how the day works. So at that pace, I spend most of the day walking around like this, trying to work out what the fuck happened on Saturday and why the Cumbrand store hasn't got any daffodils, you know. That is a real one. And do you know the reason why? Because people have mistaken them for spring onions. Right. I was genuinely worried that we were going to kill people because they needed them. Anyway, that's a different story. Isn't it funny what bubbles out at times? Anyway, so I am in that stage, walking at pace down the corridor with a few other people, looking at whatever. 34 million transactions a week. You've got quite a lot to think about. And I see Tamsin. And I say, oh, brilliant, Tamsin's back. And I stop, and I say, hey, Tamsin, how you doing? And I give her a hug, and I go, how's it feeling? Lovely to have you back. I'm so pleased you're back. How's Tilly? Look, it's Monday. I'm quite busy today, but, I'm free. I'm around a bit tomorrow. Should we have a cup of tea? I'd love to see some pictures of the baby, and da-da-da-da. And off I go. I don't even know if she said anything. I just kept going, right? Hug, chat, blur, off. A year later, she came to see me and said that 30 seconds made all the difference to her career, because she was shaky as hell. She didn't know if she belonged there anymore. She was like, do they still need me? Do they still value me? What is my place? My role has changed. I've got a different boss. What the fuck's going on? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Maybe I should just be at home with Tilly, blah, blah. Now, I didn't know any of that. I didn't stop to think about any of that. I just did what a human being would do, right? So to me, inspiring every day is knowing, name's changed, that Natalie has got a pet rabbit that she really, really cares about. It doesn't matter what I think about grown-ups having pet rabbits. It matters to her. I need to know that Rob doesn't give a shit about managing people, but really, really cares about being in the big conversations. And actually, that's what floats his boat. I need to know that Sue is, in her mind, on maternity leave when her dog has puppies. That's what matters. You're seen, you're known, you're heard, you're understood, you're cared about, you're happy. Happy brains are 32% more productive than neutral brains. I can do a whole other schmozzle on that, we can talk about that another time. That's what I think inspiring is. And when I talk to my mum about that, Mum would say, isn't that just being a decent human being? It's not leadership, Sarah. Leadership, inspire. It's just being a decent person. And I say, yeah, bloody right it is. It is just being a decent person. But Mum, you'd be surprised how often that gets lost in the need for more fancy thinking, more analysis, more stuff to happen to complicate our lives. And she'd look at me and go, and her estimation of business people would fall through the floor. So I stumbled upon this guy the other day. I don't mean literally, he died in 1977, that would be very weird. But I like this. Any intelligent, well, you can read it. I don't think it takes a lot of courage. Ernst and I disagree. He died in the 70s, maybe it was different in the 50s and 60s. I love the idea of an economist who writes about economics as if people mattered. Because I haven't studied a lot of economics, but that's sort of the point. People don't matter, right? We're just a sort of rational group of, on average, we behave rationally, is sort of, I think, the basis of economics. But as if people mattered, I love that. I like the cut of his jib already. My only difference with him is I don't think it takes courage. I just think start doing it, right? What's the nub of the issue? What's the real point here? Can we strip away some of the extraneous detail? Can we start with the first thing first and move to the next stuff later? Can you explain that as if you were explaining it to my mum? Can we just try it without the jargon and do a bit of plain English speak, see where we get to? Those sorts of things, I think, are not incredibly brave. If you can get over the idea that we're paid for results, not for our individual cleverness. We don't need to be tricksy hobbitses. We can just move in that opposite. I don't know what the opposite of tricksy is. Untrixy, I don't know. But that's what we need to be. Because I think, so basically, I'll shut up in a minute, I implore you to not be intelligent fools. The combined intelligence in this room is off the scale. How much foolishness is there in the way we apply those little grey cells? I don't know. Only you know. Because I think the world would be a much better place if we valued the skill of boiling things down rather than steaming them up.